President Trump had a blunt response when asked whether a potential ceasefire deal between Russia and Ukraine would require Kyiv to recognize Russia's illegal seizure of Crimea in 2014. "I don't care. Look, I just want to see the war end. I don't care if they both sign an agreement. I have no favorites. I don't want to have any favorites. I want a deal done." Trump emphasized that while the status of Crimea doesn't matter to him, ending the war in Ukraine does. According to sources, he's grown increasingly frustrated that a peace agreement remains elusive as he nears his 100th day in office. He reiterated to reporters today that he has no favorites in the conflict, but then criticized President Zelensky, saying he's been more difficult to negotiate with than Vladimir Putin. "I think we have a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelensky. I thought it might be easier to deal with him, but so far it's been harder. That's okay." Meanwhile, Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is scheduled to meet one-on-one with President Putin this Friday. This meeting comes as Russian missiles continue to hit Kyiv and Kharkiv. Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, reacted strongly to the president's comments. Of course he has a favorite, and that favorite is Vladimir Putin. Trump has already made major concessions to the Russians. He's said Ukraine will never become a NATO member, and that there will be no NATO security guarantees. That essentially hands Russia key demands and undermines long-standing US and NATO policy since 2008. Bolton warned that these positions aren't about achieving a lasting peace but amount to surrendering to Russia. This is not a peace plan. It's a ceasefire that lets Russia regroup for a third invasion. Putin made it clear in 2022 that his goal is to recreate the Russian Empire, and Ukraine is central to that. Trump's approach is a strategic mistake that threatens US national security around the world. Asked about Trump's frustration with the slow progress toward a peace deal, Bolton suggested Trump doesn't understand the nature of the conflict. Trump thinks the war is senseless. But for Ukrainians, it's a fight for independence. For Russia, it's about imperial conquest. These are irreconcilable positions, no matter how Trump sees it. If reports are true that Witkoff is pressing for lifting sanctions, especially those on Nord Stream 2, Bolton said that would be another major concession to Russia. Politico is reporting that Witkoff, now on his fourth meeting with Putin regarding Ukraine, is pushing to ease sanctions. The New York Times, meanwhile, reports that European officials familiar with the proposed agreement say it includes de facto US recognition of Crimea as part of Russia, something President Zelensky has explicitly rejected. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, back when he was a senator, co-sponsored legislation to prevent such recognition. Bolton strongly criticized the idea. If the U.S. recognizes the annexation of Crimea, it would be a disgrace and a green light to aggression worldwide. It would be a betrayal of American values and a major blow to our credibility. This would encourage China on Taiwan, Russia on former Soviet states, and rogue regimes elsewhere. He added, "People don't realize how the world reads this. Trump's trade wars with allies and this appeasement of autocrats undermine America's word, our alliances, and our extended deterrence. That kind of chaos is dangerous." Vice President J.D. Vance, speaking earlier today, said the U.S. has made it clear to both sides that it may walk away from the process if there's no agreement. "We've issued a very explicit proposal. It's time for them to say yes, or we walk away. The only way to stop the killing is to freeze the lines and start building better futures for Russia and Ukraine." Asked what that would mean, Bolton warned that it would amount to abandoning Ukraine and legitimizing territorial conquest. What Vance is really saying is that Ukraine should surrender 20% of its land, all in response to 2 unprovoked invasions. That's a dangerous precedent, a roadmap not only for Russia but also for China and other authoritarian regimes. Trump today also claimed that no one is asking Ukraine to recognize Crimea as Russian, even though reports suggest otherwise. The New York Times noted that Rubio once led the charge to block such recognition, but has now distanced himself from the latest negotiations, even canceling a planned appearance at recent Ukraine talks in London. Back on the ground, the war rages on. A Russian drone strike today killed 9 civilians and injured 30 in Ukraine, according to local officials. Meanwhile, British officials reported progress in meetings with Ukrainian representatives in London, though high-level U.S. involvement seems to be waning. Asked for his reaction, Democratic Congressman Jake Klaus, a former Marine, didn't hold back. Putin doesn't respect Trump because Trump negotiates from weakness. The way to deal with Russia is from a position of strength. That means letting Ukraine use the $300 billion in frozen Russian assets to build a real army ensuring freedom of navigation in the Black Sea and backing Ukraine's path into the EU. He concluded, "Only by securing Ukraine's independence can we get to real negotiations. Giving Russia everything up front isn't negotiation, it's capitulation."